So for domain of a composition, G of F or F of G, it always starts with the domain of whatever's on the inside. So let's do G of F first. The domain of G of F starts with the domain of F. So the domain of F, we're not allowed to do square roots of negatives. So that means the inside the square root, the radicand has to be greater than or equal to 0. Which means x, 4x, has to be greater than or equal to 1, which means x has to be greater than or equal to 1/4. So it starts with the domain of F, but it has to work all the way through. So it starts with being greater than or equal to 1/4. Is there anything that we're not allowed to plug all the way through into G? Since it's x squared, that's a polynomial, the domain's negative infinity to positive infinity. So everything would work. No matter what we plug in, it's going to work in x squared. Since everything works in G, we don't have to remove anything else. This will be our domain of F. Let's just write it as an interval, because that's how we always wrote domain. Greater than or equal to 1/4 means it starts at 1/4 with a bracket, and greater than means it goes to infinity. And this is G of F. So for the other question here, f of g is very similar. You start with g this time because you start with the inside function. So the domain of g, which we already said, was negative infinity to positive infinity. And when we plug in anything into g, when you square it, it only will output a positive number. So no matter what we plug into g, it's only going to give us a positive number in return. Because negative times negative is positive, positive times positive is positive. No matter what you square, you only get a positive. So if you're only plugging positive numbers into here, almost everything is going to work. Because 4 times a positive minus 1, we're not going to get anything that's going to make that not work. 4. Now, the only thing we got to be careful about is a little bit of fractions. If we plug in 1, you get 4 times 1. That works. But when you get a fraction, we still have to worry about that 1/4 where it starts at. And that's where this one gets pretty tricky. So we can take that 1/4. We can only get values greater than 1/4. So that means x squared, the answer to it, whatever it is, has to be greater than or equal to that 1/4, which is our domain of f. So if you solve this, you would square root both sides. And the square root of 1/4 is a half, which means that's really all we have to worry about is the half. It's plus or minus 1/2. So negative 1/2, positive 1/2. It's a quadratic. It's a U-shaped parabola that passes through those 2 points like this. and it has to be greater than 1/4. So where is it greater than 1/4? That's above, and it's above from negative infinity to negative 1/2, and from 1/2 to infinity. And then since it was an or equal to, it's brackets in those spots.